This video will feature full game spoilers for Expedition 33. You have been warned. This year, the gaming industry was taken by storm because of a game that nobody saw coming, Clair Obscur Expedition 33, which launched in the spring. This was a game that was in the works for years by a small and new studio that's now swept award show after award show and has more Game Award nominations than any game in the show's history. I've now played this game twice and can easily say it's one of the greatest games I've ever played, like definitely one of the best games I've played this decade, and is quickly gunning for one of my favorite games. When you know, you know. Few games have stayed in my mind long after completing them quite like Expedition 33. It's a game where you can say a lot about it and still feel like you're only barely scratching the surface. And what makes this game's role in my life so shocking is the fact that it's the furthest thing from a game I ever thought I'd play. Before we actually get into what the video title's about, I thought it would be really funny to do a story time, just a little one, just a small one. I barely even knew what this game was until one of my bestest friends in the whole wide world, Retropolis Zone, was endlessly badgering me with messages about how he was going to play it and how everyone keeps saying it's peak and how he's going to be the judge of that, and he was like, holy shit, this game is amazing. But then, he started this ceaseless campaign to get me to play it. I've gone on record in the past saying that RPGs were never really games that captured my attention that much. I've played some that I guess were considered bad or whatever, but even when I play ones that were good, I just get bored and lose interest. I knew I had little experience with ones that were really considered peak though, so I never had anything bad to say about the genre. I just decided it wasn't really my thing and stuck to what I was already familiar with. But again, this man simply would not quit. He tried everything from the guy who sang Bury the Light and Devil May Cry 5 sings for this game, and the guy who plays Daredevils in this game, you like that show, to the game has dodging and parrying, you like it when games do that, to this game has a Last of Us level moral choice ending, you'll totally make a video on it if you play the game. And I was like, no. Bitch, if I ever play this game, and that is a strong if, I will obviously never make a video on it, and you can quote me on that. But, I eventually decided to buy the game to shut him up, and
I'm here.
Oh man, this game actually seems kind of interesting. And
Petrus must fall.
oh, maybe this game is kind of fun. Oh no. This game is really good. But come on, Surely I won't make a video on it.
You treat me as if I'm still 5!
I treat you as if the shadow from the worst day of our lives is going to suffocate you and take you from us too!
And I think I have to make a video on this game. So yeah, talk about own of the fucking century. I look like a complete and total clown on the internet for adamantly fighting RZ every step of the way, and yet I enjoyed the game exactly as he said I would and made a video exactly like he said I would. What a genius he was for his ability to predict that. While I'm admitting things, that hilarious catchphrase of mine, Code Veronica, is defined by the "what an idiot I am for my inability to predict that" principle. I'm coining that now. Was also an RZ original.
The action of which immediately set the guy's death in stone. What an idiot I am for my inability to predict that.
Now this video isn't an analysis on the gameplay, it's basically just me dumping my thoughts on the story on paper with a focus on the ending, since that's all I really want to talk about, but I figured I could give some other thoughts I had about this game as a game before we get into all that. For starters, this game really should teach the AAA industry a thing or two. Not that I don't like AAA games, I really do, but the thing is, E33 was made for much less budget, and that fact is evident when you see small things like the draw distance in the overworld. It's not the greatest, and how in-game dialogue, nobody's mouth moves, but guess what? Nobody fucking cares. The visuals look amazing, and the art in this game is mind-blowing, and the writing and voice acting are top-notch. The game made all the right compromises to keep the budget really reasonable and manageable for a team of like 30 people. A team who all believed in the vision of what they were making and brought that vision to life in all the ways that really matter. A lot of AAA studios are releasing games like once every half-decade now, when they used to do one like every year 20 years ago. Not that we need to return to that schedule specifically, just that this game being such a beautiful work of art despite not having a AAA budget and a 200-person dev team should be a wake-up call. Next, this game also taught me what it has always been about RPGs that never clicked with me, and that is, I am trash at them. Thank goodness this game had a parry system and a dodge mechanic, and also, thankfully, Verso has the mechanic where our letter fills up and he does more damage when the rank is higher. If not for those things, I'd have never beaten this game in a million goddamn years. All that stuff reminded me of Devil May Cry, something I'm reasonably good at, so I was able to understand those easily and basically nothing else. I'm being so serious right now. On my first playthrough, I put a new meaning to the phrase Disaster Expedition. I might actually have been the worst player to ever claim they beat this game. The reason is because RPGs aren't really games you can brute force. You gotta know how to build a good team and what the systems of the game are. I was trash at Devil May Cry for a long time, but through sheer brute force, I eventually became good. You can't really do that here. When the tutorials for Lune and CL and Monoko came on the screen, I was just like, yeah, whatever, nerds, and pressed the skip button. So yeah, I was one of those players, the kind of player you see on the E33 subreddit who didn't know how stains worked, how Monoko's wheel worked, and what made CL go to Twilight mode, or that my life would have been made much easier if I put Maelle in Virtuo's stance. On my first run, for every weapon I unlocked, I never read past the power level. Every weapon has a passive feature you get for using them. Didn't read it, just read the power number. I didn't know what Luminas were until I got the painted power in Act 3 and realized everyone needed it. Literally went the entirety of Acts 1 and 2 with no Luminas equipped. I just kept increasing the Lumina numbers on my characters, but didn't know what it actually did. So naturally, I thought it was the hardest game I ever played in my life. Which is why I'm thankful it has a parry system. I was able to understand that, and was able to play as Gustav and Verso without issue, but I never blamed the game for it, I just assumed it was a hard game. It was only in the post-game where I was able to understand how you actually play it, so on my second playthrough it turns out this game is pretty manageable. It was quite fun tearing a boss like the Lamp Master to pieces in the first try when he kicked my ass into next Tuesday the first time. I still died to Renoir and the Paintress a few times, but the game was super fun to play both when I was terrible at it and when I was slightly more competent. So, if you were looking for a recommendation, I wholeheartedly want as many people to play this game as possible. It is a great game, really. It actually makes me want to try other RPGs like this copy of Final Fantasy X and X-2 that's been on my shelf for almost a decade without being touched. The game is just awesome, and I think everyone who worked on it deserves all their flowers. The game is also cheaper than most new games are, which is a great deal. But then, the story was really the incredible part. It pulled me in like no other game has in quite some time. The story was just really emotional and engaging and thought-provoking and funny and heartfelt and tragic at all the right moments, featuring a whole cast of three-dimensional characters you love or love to hate or come to understand, featuring an emotional score with tracks that were super atmospheric or epic or sad or some mix of those things. It was all top-class stuff. The ending was the moment where I knew I had to make a video babbling about the game because of how much I thought about it after completing it. Since you're watching this video where I give my thoughts on why Maelle's ending is my preference, I assume you know what the game is about, but in the event you are totally clueless and just love the sound of my sensuous voice, I will give you a rundown. The basic plot is that in a twisted version of Paris called Lumiere, there's a god called the Paintress who writes a new number ticking down every year, and everyone of that age dies when she writes the number in an event called the Gommage. To end this mass death event, every year the people of Lumiere send out an expedition to kill the Paintress, but nobody has ever come back. So Expedition 33 sets sail, and most of them are killed in seconds by a mysterious man. Your very small party, consisting of Gustav, Lune, Maelle, and CL, have to then survive and try their best to defeat the Paintress. After the death of Gustav, the team is joined by Verso and Monoko as the team of 5 defeat the Paintress and seemingly save the world until the ultimate Gommage happens and everyone dies at once this time. You then learn that the entire world is actually a living painting. The true story of the game is that canvases that a painter makes can come to life and you can go inside of it. In the real world of the game, the story is about the Desandre family consisting of Renoir, Aline, Clair, Verso, and Alicia. This is a family of painters, and in this world, painters are in some kind of feud with the writers who burned the Desandre family's house, scarring Alicia permanently and killing Verso. His death broke the family as Aline decided to live in his childhood canvas and made an alternate version of her family where Verso was still alive and well and was immortal, which is the guy you play as. Aline also populated Verso's canvas with humans, the people of Lumiere. Aline is the paintress, and the painted Renoir fights on her behalf and was the one who killed the expedition, while painted Verso wants to end his life of immortality and save his mother from using this world as a coping mechanism because it's destroying her body on the outside. While the real Renoir is the one responsible for the Gommage because he wanted to get his wife to come back to the real world, but with her still in the canvas, he could only erase so many people at once because she's the more powerful painter between the two. The older sister, Claire, instructed Alicia to go in the canvas and get involved, but she got sucked in and was reborn as Maelle with no memory of her previous life until the end of Act 2. In Act 3, Renoir wants to destroy the canvas for good while Aline is out, but Maelle prefers her identity in it and fights alongside her friends to get him out. But the final conflict is between Maelle, who wants to keep the canvas alive and ongoing, and the painted Verso, who wants to destroy it so he can finally rest in peace and his family can stop using him as a coping mechanism. You get to choose to fight as Maelle or Verso in the final boss, and which character you pick determines what ending you get. I tried to keep that explanation brief, but the story is pretty complicated, as I'm sure that brief description would lead you to believe. But now we can dig into the ending and why I picked Maelle's in my second playthrough, already knowing what both endings looked like. The most important question to ask before discussing the ending is this. Is the canvas real? Are the people in it real people? In Maelle's ending, the canvas goes on, and in Verso's ending, he destroys it and ends all life inside of it. Your answers to these questions are a big part of the debate as to which ending is better. To be fair, when the Act 2 plot twist happened, my first reaction was, oh wait, none of it was real? But it's much deeper than that. I think the actual point of the game is that it is real. In fact, it has to be for the story to have any impact. I think it's natural in a moral choice type ending to want to try and minimize the impact to make the choice feel easier. I see this all the time in Last of Us discourse, where you hear scientific explanations about why the cure wouldn't realistically work when the point of the game isn't to be scientific or realistic. The point is, do you save your family or everyone else? On that note, E33 goes a step further than both Last of Us games, which feature controversial choice endings by letting the player directly decide how it ends by choosing who to side with. But anyway, if the canvas and the people in it were not real, then the story is robbed of a lot of its potency. The entire point of Acts 1 and 2 before you learn what's really going on is to get you to be emotionally invested in the world of the canvas and the people in it. Every character is three-dimensional, even ones who aren't in it for very long. Take the prologue, for example. You meet Sophie, who's Gustav's ex-girlfriend. You find out that the relationship didn't really work out because Gustav wanted to have kids and Sophie didn't because she felt like it was unfair to bring kids into a world where their life would be inevitably cut short by the gommage. This is a controversial choice, as seen by one woman who does have kids, who thinks Sophie's selfish for not wanting to ensure the continued population of Lumiere. But you can see how both of these people would come to these conclusions. But Sophie also speculates that maybe the paintress is sad too, trapped in the same cycle as the people of Lumiere. All that happening right before her own gommage, characterizing her as someone with a lot of empathy, so much so that she won't have kids because she wants to be fair to them in her own unique way. The gommage is a mass death event that is genuinely tragic. It tears families apart and creates orphans every single year. It immediately gives the game high stakes as the characters are fighting for a chance at a future, knowing that there isn't much time left as that number is only going to keep going down, giving their people less and less time to live. And that's just the prologue. While you play, it's like Gustav was lab engineered to be the most likable kind of guy. He's super smart, but also endearingly awkward.
Golgra said to shout the password as loud as we can. Well, Gustav, you're the loudest.
Really? Hey.
Come on, don't be shy.
Get out of my way!
Jeez, tu pochino paparino.
No, it's the password.
Pico femicola, gor granda vari bombino, passwordito, gomiku rapito sava.
Look, I am very sorry. It's just that Golgra told us that's the password, and
Come on, it's a gestural. He'll have forgotten in about a minute.
I'm sorry.
But also kind of badass with his mechanical arm that does the overcharge attack.
For those who come after.
He questions himself in the mission a few times, but still faces things head-on when the moment requires it. We feel everything he feels, so that when he dies at the end of Act 1, it's a really devastating moment. The game does an excellent job playing with your emotions here, as I was like, no! When he got shot by Mirror Renoir. But then that starts a battle where you can heal yourself, and I was on full copium thinking, no, maybe he's gonna make it, maybe he's gonna make it. But then you do like, no damage to Renoir, and I was like, oh, he's screwed. But then you kill him and get a victory screen, but when I saw the 0 XP gain from it, I was like, oh no, Gustav is dead. But the scene was so great because it's a wonderful conclusion to his character arc. When he believed he lost everything at the beginning of the expedition, he gets a moment to himself and tries to take the most extreme way out until Lune finds him at the last second. But he's still not that confident in the mission from that point all the way onto the part where they find Maelle, his adopted sister. He starts getting some mojo back and lightens up and even thinks they have a chance against the Paintress now. just stressing that if they ever see that white-haired man again, Renoir, they better run like their life depends on it. But here, in his final moments, he's facing the impossible challenge of trying to beat the unbeatable Renoir simply because he trapped Maelle. So he's gonna fight tooth and nail to save her.
For those who come after. Right?
That whole thing has made me really emotional, but then players are forced to use Verso as he replaces Gustav on the team, which makes him instantly feel untrustworthy, but you come to learn about him more and maybe see him in a more human light and empathize with him too, also watching him banter with Monoko leading to the funniest scene in the game.
We're heading for old Lumiere.
Okay, bye.
Hey, come on. Hey. Hey, look. I know we failed before, but look, you doofus. Don't you recognize her?
Of course I do.
Then you know what that means. This is our shot. It might be our only shot.
This is your only shot. Out of the question. I will never join you again.
There will be a lot of fighting, though.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's true.
There will be a lot of fighting.
Exactly.
Count me in then.
Good.
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 Yes, good.
You know, I've been told that my personality is very similar to that of Monoko, and I'm glad everyone noticed. Verso and Monoko is basically just RZ and I generously allowed him to be the sexy one in that comparison, of course. But anyway, I think every character feels real in this and has something to relate to. Like Lune's struggle with how her parents put the burden of their legacy on her, even thinking about that in their final moments. Lune hears their voices in her head telling her what to do, even long after they're gone. Verso correctly identifying that those voices are actually Lune's, not her parents. And she can do whatever she wants. Everyone knows a person like Ciel as well, an extremely emotionally intelligent person who's always there for people when they need them, a person whose personality is also informed by tragedy and loss as well. And most of us have felt like Maelle does at 16, feeling vaguely out of place in a way you can't really describe or understand. Even Monoko feels real in his relationships with Verso and Noko. It actually hit me pretty hard when Noko died in Act 2 and Monoko mourns his loss. You can bring him back in a post-game side quest, but he'll never be exactly the same. So my point is that the game is all about getting the audience to feel deeply for the characters in the story. We feel these emotions, and everything we felt watching them in their desperate journey to save the world was real. They feel every moment of joy and heartbreak. In the context of the story, that makes them real people. Therefore, it cannot be argued that the real Renoir is killing people en masse every year in the Gommage. That is just a fact. This is an artificial world created in the story's real world, but everything inside of this canvas is equally valid, so my stance is that Maelle's ending is my choice from the offset, before I even dive into the nuance for her or Verso, simply because in one option, an entire population is murdered for the benefit of the few people who created these circumstances to begin with, and in the other, these innocent people get to live, which is the goal we were fighting for the entire game. I will get into the emotional substance of the endings for Verso and Maelle towards the end of the video, don't worry. I was just establishing an important fact that I think the canvas is real since it centers the discussion. But before I can get into that emotional substance, it's also important to discuss the family drama that the story revolves around, since that's an equally important bit of context. This is a story that demands to be played more than once, because much of the first two acts are alluding to things you'd only understand on a second playthrough, and it's only on the second run where my opinion's really locked in on many things. To be fair to people who don't think the canvas is real, I'm just saying what I believe based on what's in the game. To add credence to the opposing point of view, there already is a debate about that in the story. Clair, the older sister of the family, clearly believes that the life inside of the canvas isn't real. If you do believe that it is, then she's a monster. In a bit of post-game content, you can find the painted Clair, and you learn that the real Clair captured her and forced her to make monsters all day, the monsters you fight in the game that are designed to kill expeditioners. Because if these monsters kill expeditioners, their chroma can't go back to Aline, and that gives Renoir an advantage in his fight with her, and Clair needs that because she wants both of her parents back in the real world. But Clair knows the people in the canvas are thinking and breathing people because she occasionally goes into it to tell Painted Verso something important, like how she went into it to tell him Maelle was in the canvas now and to keep an eye on her before dipping out again, while simultaneously believing that this isn't Verso or a real person at all. And that's an interesting thing about this story, how even characters with small amounts of screen time have believable motivations. If you think the expeditioners are real people, then Clair is a mass murderer because of how many expeditioners she's caused the death of. However, you can understand why she is the way that she is. We're repeatedly informed of the fact that she's pragmatic to a fault and tends to carry the world on her shoulders, so to her, fighting the writers is the most important thing. So the fact that her mom created a new life for herself inside of Verso's canvas is crazy. And something she believes her own mother would look down upon prior to Verso's death if someone else did it. and her dad fighting endlessly to get Aline out instead of helping deal with their real problems is equally mystifying for her. So from that perspective, her actions make sense. She can just divorce herself from the consequences if she just writes off this world as unimportant or secondary. The real Renoir is a fascinating character to think about from that perspective too. Unlike Clair, he clearly thinks the people of the canvas are valid. When he first appears in the flesh, he apologizes to Painted Verso because he thinks it's unfair that he was created to fill the void in Aline's heart after her son died. He acknowledges to this Verso that the pain of being an immortal being that's meant to fill the role of somebody else must have been very difficult. And before the final boss, CL and Lune give their perspective to the real Renoir.
Grief often blinds us, and we make choices we can never take back.
You grieve for two.
I grieve for many.
The choices of parents leave indelible marks upon their children. But ultimately, the voices in their head have to be their own. You cannot set the boundaries of their life for them.
He never dismisses them entirely. He even acknowledges their points and just says that he's going to end the canvas anyway, which is debatably more evil than Clair. Because he acknowledges the lived experience of these people in the canvas, but he's done the mental calculations and has decided that the well-being of his family is just more important to him than all of them. And that almost comes off as noble when he says it, because you can clearly see that he does love his family with everything he has. The longer a person from the real world stays in the canvas, the more it hurts their body, eventually killing them. He's trying to save Aline and Maelle from that. His solution is just destroying the canvas and everything in it so they can't come back. This canvas in particular is so enticing to them because it's Verso's childhood canvas, meaning it contains a piece of his soul. So if he destroys it, his hope is that everyone can come to accept that Verso is dead and grieve more healthily than this. But I also think Renoir is coming from a place of guilt and grief that he won't admit, like when he says this.
Verso's death broke us. Want it to be fixed, I need it to be fixed, I
felt like that was him feeling like he needed control of the situation. He wasn't there when his son sacrificed himself in the fire to save his sister. Renoir would give anything to trade places with Verso to allow both his kids to live on, but he wasn't there and can't do anything about it now, so he's almost overcompensating to protect the family he has left. Which also goes to show how similar Renoir is to the painted counterpart you fight throughout the first 2 acts of the story. Their motivations are almost identical. Aline painted him to be a person who fights tooth and nail to protect his family, just on her side of the debate this time. When Painted Renoir kills an Expeditioner, that allows their chroma to go back to Aline, making her stronger. So therefore he kills Expeditioners without any mercy, as seen when Expedition 33 first lands on the beach, and when he kills Gustave without even thinking about it. He doesn't acknowledge Gustave's existence or humanity at all. He just knows that his life and family are at stake, and Gustave is just a guy in the way. In that sense, Painted Renoir is crueler than the real one, despite being a painted person himself. His relentless nature is also explained by the part before he dies, where Painted Renoir explains to Verso that he believes Aline created him with extra guilt over not saving the original Verso. But that still isn't going to stop Verso from enacting his plans. He's also one of the more interesting characters in the game, because on the second run, it's almost hilarious how every single thing he says is a lie, but the writing was super clever about it. After Gustave's death, it's finally time to learn something about what's going on here, and Verso is there to spout lies to the expedition. But these are all very believable explanations to people who don't have any information, which goes for both the expedition and the audience.
But how are you alive and not...
Old? I don't know exactly, but some of us stopped aging, and we're not affected by the gamage.
Some of you? Like the man on the cliff?
Anwar, our commander.
Why? Why did he massacre our team?
How could he turn on his own people?
He believes his immortality is a gift from the paintress. Killing her would kill him too, and he enjoys living forever.
And you don't?
Burying everyone you know while you live on can weigh you down a bit.
Similarly, in Old Lumiere, we learn that Verso is Renoir's son, but there is a subtle misdirect where Maelle wants to kill Renoir for killing Gustave, and he says this.
You haven't told her the truth. Have you, son?
His use of the word son makes Maelle and the audience think that that is the truth that wasn't told, not that Maelle is really from the outside world and that they're in a painting, which Verso can use to his advantage to keep lying. But that lying doesn't make him a bad person inherently, it's just what he thinks he needs to do. To mirror Verso, he's lived a lifetime of immortality in this canvas, but he was made aware of what he really was by the real Clair, so he knows that his whole existence is a maladaptive coping mechanism for his mother. He also knows that his mother's dying the longer she stays in this canvas. He's depressed and miserable because he doesn't want to live forever in the shadow of someone else he'll never meet. And he wants to save Aline from herself, so for him, he's happy to guide the team on the mission to defeat the Paintress, since he knows that when they do it, his mom will be saved, and then the real Renoir will come in, destroy the canvas for good, and Verso can finally die. It doesn't excuse the sheer level of emotional manipulation he did to the team, as Lune rightfully calls him out on after Maelle manages to bring them all back, but you understand where Verso is coming from. Even when you come to learn the truth about the Act 1 ending, how Verso was watching the entire fight between Gustave and Painted Renoir. He could have stepped in and saved Gustave, but intentionally let him die because he thought that the close relationship he had with Maelle might get in the way of his plans. Like if, by some chance, Maelle learned the truth of the canvas, she'd want to keep it around to save Gustave. But if he was murdered, she'd want revenge, and he could use that to his advantage as well, so he let it happen and swooped in at the last second. Verso probably feels bad about how much pain he caused Maelle in the process, evidenced by his looking at the ground when they do a funeral for Gustave.
We could never tell if you were my brother or my father. But to me, you were both. Best brother and father I've ever had.
But he wouldn't make a different choice if he had the chance, I don't think. Aline, the Paintress, doesn't get a lot of dialogue in this game, but as expected, she also feels like a three-dimensional character that you can understand. After the end of the second playthrough, I thought a lot of the conflict in this game was Aline's fault. Losing a child is probably one of the most painful emotions a person can experience, but then Aline went into Verso's canvas and turned it into something it wasn't. Verso created this whole world so that he and Clair could run around and explore together when they were kids, but Aline wanted to numb herself, so she went into it and created the painted versions of Renoir and her kids and populated this world with humans who had their own personalities and struggles, but they're ultimately people she created to be set dressing for her new imaginary life. Aline does this while she actually has responsibilities to her community, and while still having two living daughters who need support, but she just dodges all of it. Which, as I'll get into in a second, is a core difference between Maelle and her mother, if you ask me. I feel quite terribly for Aline, but the things she did to cope created all the drama as a result. Which leads to Maelle. After she remembers the truth about what happened in the real world that led to her being in the canvas, she wants to stay. Many interpret her behavior and attitude as having learned nothing from Aline, who almost completely lost herself and her life inside the canvas, making Maelle the villain of the story for still trying to keep this canvas alive, while Renoir and Painted Verso are the heroes for trying to force life to move on. And I can understand, to a point, why someone would think that. Minus the part about her being a villain. I don't think Aline is a villain either, I just that her grief caused the story, whereas Maelle's grief and actions are a product of circumstances she was placed in because she's a kid. As I already stated, Maelle's ending of keeping the canvas alive is one I'm in favor of because I don't think it's fair to have a whole world of living people be killed. But looking at it from Maelle's point of view, her life outside the canvas is tragic. She was manipulated by the writers, and that led to the fire and Verso's death. Maelle was burned in the fire, so her face is scarred and she lost an eye and the ability to speak. As she says to Renoir and Painted Verso, she doesn't have a lot to look forward to. If this were real life, and say, she was daydreaming all day in her room instead of living a life, I'd try to encourage her to find what meaning she could in the real world despite the horrible trauma and guilt. But this is a world where you can just go inside of a different world and be whoever you want. Maelle lived a complete childhood inside the canvas. It's not like Aline, who knowingly went into this canvas and shaped it to her will to make herself feel better. Clair told Maelle to go in and help her parents resolve their conflict, but Maelle was trapped inside of the canvas and reborn with no memory of anything that happened before. So she innocently lived a life here and made connections with people like Gustave. To her, these relationships are equally real, and she'd have to grieve the loss of them too just to return to her life on the outside. A life that looks like it sucks. And I'm talking about before the fire. When you briefly control Maelle in the real world, you can see the wall of paintings that the children made. Maelle informs the player that the tiny one is hers, because she was never as good of a painter as Clair and Verso. She was more interested in books, and since the mortal enemies of this family are the writers, I'm sure you can imagine that her interests put her in conflict with her family. The tiny one she painted is on the wall, because, quote, it was the only one Mom thought was good enough to be on the wall, telling us a lot about Aline's parenting. So Maelle felt like she was never good enough for her mom. The mom who clearly embraced Verso's passion for music by showing him how to play piano and embraced Clair's talent for painting, as seen by Clair's abilities rivaling her parents. So Maelle must have spent much of her life feeling left out by Aline. But she outright says it when they go to destroy the last Axon, that she just assumed she was the least favorite of both of her parents.
Claire's the oldest. She's just so perfect. So accomplished and talented. Papa's favorite. He's so proud of her. And Verso. Verso could always make Papa laugh. I had so many inside jokes. Then there's me.
And then there's you. The actual favorite. The one he calls his hidden star, but who's too shy and self-conscious to see it.
Yet here I am, messing things up even more.
Look around. He just wants you to fly.
The Axons are massive creatures that Renoir painted to reflect his family, which shows how much he loves them that he'd create these massive beings to represent them. However, it also shows something about his own parenting that each Axon is almost a criticism as much as it is an act of devotion, or at least that's how it came off to me. Like the Verso Axon guards the truth with lies, something that the painted Verso does throughout the entire story. So, Renoir loved his son, but clearly thought his son was some kind of a spin doctor. He made the Clair Axon one that carries the world on its shoulders. She was so offended by this portrayal that she had this Axon murdered. But anyway, as I was saying, the Alicia Axon is a doll that sits in a chair that won't fly despite the immense potential Renoir sees in her. So Verso was right to say that Maelle was Renoir's favorite, since that Axon was a far more generous take than the other two kids got, despite still seeming like kind of a criticism. Taken from Maelle's lived experience, you can imagine that she felt as though her dad was annoyed by her lack of interest in things, when from his perspective he just wanted his daughter to live life to the fullest, and still does despite her current state. But again, from her perspective, why should Maelle want to go back to the real world? She thought, incorrectly, that her dad thought she wasn't measuring up, and correctly identified that her mother had something against her, which Aline absolutely does. Before the fire, it was because of the tension created by Maelle's lack of painting skill and interest. But then, after the fire, Aline clearly blames Maelle for Verso's death. I think it's complicated, like all families are. I don't think Aline hates Maelle or enjoys resenting her, but just that Aline does resent her own daughter and can't help it. Like, if you were Maelle, how would you feel when you relearn the truth and then you realize something? Damn, when my mom had the chance to create a fake perfect life where she made exact copies of Clair and Verso and Renoir, and she still made me burned and scarred and unable to speak. The painted Alicia's backstory is that she was burned in the fire, but Verso never was, so he's alive. That would really hurt, I imagine. That this is how your mom sees you, as responsible for Verso's death and defined by the fire and not much else. But then the nuance of the situation is that Alicia clearly still loves the paintress even though she knows what she is and that she was painted this way on purpose. And Aline painted this Alicia to be a really good writer. Like everything she says in the letter she writes to Maelle is very eloquent. So Aline sees those qualities in her daughter, but just resents her presence nevertheless. I see the take that Verso's ending is better because in it, the family is able to heal and grieve properly and move on from the real Verso's death. That's a fair take, especially since it seems like Aline and Renoir have patched things up and are moving forward. But the ending says nothing about how well the family is doing as a unit. What really stands out to me about Verso's ending is that Maelle looks really alone in it. To the point where there's literally a Verso-sized gap between Maelle and the rest of her family. Nobody comforts her over how much she's grieving, and hell, they don't even look at her. It just made me really sad when Maelle smiles at Clair and she barely acknowledges her existence. Living with her injuries sounds hard enough, but then this dynamic looks even worse. Since you already know for a fact that your mom is never going to look at you the same again and already had issues with you anyway. And your living sister told you directly that she doubts she'd have saved you like Verso did, and that she has some lingering resentment against him for doing it. That's just really harsh, and a lot of pain to put on a kid who already feels guilty enough for how her actions led to the death of her brother. Now that's not to say Verso's ending is all bad. An objectively good thing is that Maelle's body doesn't slowly die from canvas overexposure. That is good, and the family is forced to accept that the real Verso is dead, which is also a healthy thing. But as for what happens after, we have no idea, so it's impossible to say. But that's another thing about this. Renoir and Verso tell Maelle that she can be whatever she wants and never has to live a life she doesn't want to, while trying to eject her from the place she says she wants to be. Maelle knows by Act 3 what will happen to her body if she stays, but she has weighed her options and has thought, live a happy life in the canvas with these real thinking, feeling people I love who love me, including Gustav, who she brings back to life in her ending, or live as a mute in the real world where most of your family show you open contempt. Sounds like an easy choice to me. Clair even says that to Maelle in optional dialogue, that she doesn't owe the world or her family anything, that her only obligation is to live a life she wants. Maelle didn't choose this canvas life at first, but now that she's lived it and experienced such peace and love, she wants to keep it. and she really doesn't owe the outside world anything. Like I said, I think Aline is different. Aline knowingly created this artificial world for herself. Aline had 2 living kids she owed her presence to, especially in a mourning period, and she just abandoned them both. Renoir also abandoned both of them by staying in the canvas fighting Aline instead of supporting his kids who are still around. But sticking to Aline, Clair says she's a member of the Painters' Council, and by sitting in the canvas, she's directly dodging that responsibility. Maelle doesn't have those responsibilities and doesn't owe it to her family to be present to them like her parents owe to their kids. And even when she is present anyway, they aren't there for her to begin with. In saying that, I'm not trying to say that Maelle's ending is perfect, though. In it, she forces Painted Verso to keep living on. His whole motivation in the final moments of the story are to stop Maelle and Aline and everyone from using this canvas to cope and to end his tortured existence. In one of the game's best scenes, when Maelle beats Verso in her ending, he begs to be unpainted and taken out of the story.
Unpaint me. Unpaint me.
So...
Please. I don't want this life.
Stop saying that.
I don't want this life. I don't want this life.
That makes it 100% clear that he does not want to be a part of whatever it is these people are doing. But Maelle bulldozes past him and forces him to live anyway. She even treats him as though he is the real Verso when he's made it pretty clear that he knows he's not Verso and feels pretty insecure about that fact. He never calls Maelle or the real Clair or the real Renoir his family. Whenever the real Renoir's in the room, he's always just looking at the ground and doesn't say anything. He says Maelle lied to her father in the ending, referring to the real Renoir, showing he doesn't think of that man as his father, when Maelle does genuinely see Painted Verso as a replacement for the original. His family to him are Aline, and the painted versions of Renoir, Clair, and Alicia, which is why he gets mad at Maelle for erasing Alicia without letting him say goodbye, referring to her as the only family he had left. But Maelle doesn't feel that way about him and wants him around forever. That's the dark side of Maelle's ending, that Verso is forced to keep going on and playing his part in Maelle's personal story when he's made it clear he doesn't want to. But now that she's the painting god, he doesn't get to have a say in his own life. I think both endings have pros and cons, and that's what makes both tragic in their own unique way. I don't think there is an objectively best ending. I have just decided after a lot of reflection that I side with Maelle more than Verso. As stated, this is a life Maelle didn't choose and came to love. When learning the truth about how awful her real life was and how much she loves the people in the canvas and her role in it, she naturally picks that. I thoroughly believe she's a victim of circumstances that were far beyond her control from an early age, and then when she finally got agency of her own in this story, she makes a logical choice in the end. If she didn't force Verso to live against his will, I'd say it's a better ending than his. You could compare the canvas's effects on Maelle or Aline's bodies as though it were a drug or some other maladaptive coping people use in the real world. However, again, quitting those things is objectively good. Quitting them doesn't require an entire population of innocent people dying. Maelle could leave the canvas and live on and allow these people to live on too, but this is the life she chooses for herself, and I don't see why that's wrong when you look at the options presented to her. Again, if my choices are between a whole group of lovable 3-dimensional people living and them being wiped out to help this fucked up family, I just think the option that saves more lives is better. It was irresponsible of Aline to make these people so real in the first place, but that's not Maelle's fault. She's playing with the cards she was dealt. It's not fair for Verso to have to live a life he doesn't want to either. It's also not fair for him to condemn everyone in this canvas to death for him to get the goals he wants. The tragic irony is that Verso let Gustave get murdered in Act 1, but I honestly think that if he made it to the end of the story, he would have been the only one capable of convincing Maelle that there was a happy middle ground between the two outcomes. Some say Gustave would have sided with Verso to save Maelle's life, but Gustave also really hated the paintress and the gommage that he was under the impression was her doing. I personally think he'd be the kind of person who could convince Maelle that she can try to live in the real world and also come back to the canvas too. I say it's a tragic irony since Verso thought he wouldn't get his way if Gustave was alive, but because he's dead, the only options are between two different extremes. And that's a really compelling thing about the ending of Expedition 33 that's different from a lot of other games I've played. How it does let you choose what ending you want, taking advantage of it being a video game to do that. But I don't think anybody's wrong for not agreeing with me. I have friends who stand by Maelle's ending, I have friends who stand by Verso's ending, I have friends who saw both sides and chose what made sense to them in the moment. On my first run, I wasn't sure what to pick and went with Maelle, but then watched Verso's on YouTube. I wasn't sure which I liked more and thought both were kinda right in a sense, and I guess I still feel that way, but on my second run, with everything I came to know and understand about the story, I just thought Maelle's was superior for me personally. And that's the thing that all great art does. Regardless of what you think, you'll be made to think by this ending and continue thinking about it long after the credits roll. But you know, as the video is coming to a close, there's something this whole ending got me thinking about in a more meta sense, removed from all the struggles of the characters in the story. The question, should the canvas go on forever? Removed from the actual plot of the game. You could actually look at Expedition 33 as a kind of commentary on the nature of art creation in general, because the soul of Child Verso exists in the center of the canvas. Getting him to stop painting is how you end the canvas for good. Some say that this scene before the final boss shows that Child Verso doesn't want to paint at all and Verso is trying to save him, but if you listen to Child Verso's spirit throughout the story, something you'd only be able to appreciate on a second playthrough, I think Child Verso does love his canvas. He even says it's a real place and with real people in it. It's just that he doesn't love what's been done to it since his entire family is now fighting over it and turning it into something it wasn't meant to be. In the context of the story and the rules it presents, I think I've made my stance pretty clear on which ending I prefer. But then I do find myself understanding Child Verso because creating something you care about is a really special thing. To see it diluted and changed is also a hurtful thing. But continuing to keep it going, because I guess that's what's expected of him, is equally difficult. So he's caught in a really tough spot while Maelle and Verso fight over him. So I think it's a powerful theme of Verso's ending that maybe all stories aren't meant to go on forever. Maybe that is the thing that dilutes what makes it great to begin with. I don't know. I've just spent a long time in my videos talking about how all stories should end and how an ending is what makes a story worthwhile to begin with. Which can be hard if your favorite thing doesn't go on forever, but like I said, maybe it's better appreciated for what it was rather than seeing it bloat and become something else entirely. It's better to appreciate a complete work that said what it wanted to say and take whatever you wanted from it and let it rest rather than letting it go on long past the point where it had anything left to say. Which is why I hope Expedition 33 is a one-off. I'm very excited about what the DLC for this game is going to be like since I loved this world and I'm excited for an extra piece. But if they think the game needed a sequel, I'm sure it would be good, but I also think this story feels really complete and impactful. I think they said that this specific story might be done, but the franchise Clair Obscur might become an anthology like Final Fantasy, and if they keep the gameplay and storytelling this good throughout all future entries, well, I'll be first in line to play because, at the end of the day, I thought this game was pretty neat. And this whole diatribe was just one of the many reasons why. Whether you agree or disagree, I'm sure everyone will let me know in the comments below, so that's about all the time we have for today, so I will close the video by saying what I always do. If you made it this far into the video, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.